Trans Day of Remembrance is my least favourite day of the year. It's ironic, seeing as I devote significant time each year to ensure that a remembrance service takes place. But the truth is, I hate that the service is necessary. I hate that every year we have to gather again and again and again to mourn the loss of our trans friends, colleagues, family members and others. Preparing for this year's service was perhaps harder than before. On the 26th of May this year, we lost Ezra Jackson. Ezra was a fourth-year student at Brasenose College, who was 22 years old. Ezra was a member of our community, someone who was deeply embedded in the life of their college, but who also, through their fundraising, campaigning and acting, had become known and loved throughout the wider Oxford community too. This day of remembrance is so incredibly brutal, but so sadly necessary. We spend our lives fighting for the rights of our siblings, friends, family, chosen family, to just live. To just live as people who do not conform to the rigid gender expectations that society has for so long sought to impose. Trans Day of Remembrance allows us a rare opportunity to stop, to mourn those beautiful souls we have lost, to pour out our grief, to cry before God and scream about the injustice of it all. But it also allows us to remember why we fight and campaign, day after day, month after month, year after year, for justice, for equality, for an end to the violence and hatred. So that one day, and I pray that day is soon, we might reach a point where there are no more updates to the TDoR lists. At our service this year, we reflected on 2 Samuel chapter 1, a passage which expresses David's deep grief at the loss of Jonathan and Saul. David's affection for Saul is clear throughout the passage, although they have a troubled past. But it is the way that David mourns for Jonathan that I believe we should focus on. British society is still plagued by the stiff upper lip, particularly around death. There is this weird expectation that after the church bells have rung and our loved ones are commended into God's hands, we will just suddenly be okay. But the wounds of loss are deep. Even after years and decades, whilst you might be brought to tears by the memory of the lost loved one, that deep wound, that sense that there is something, someone missing, remains. In our reading, David has lost the person that matters most to him, the person he loves the most, Jonathan. And if you're sat there thinking, there is something quite queer about this, then you're not alone. It has been speculated on lots before, but ultimately, whether or not David and Jonathan were lovers in the way that we would consider them to be, does not matter. What matters in this passage is that this beautiful, affectionate relationship has been so tragically cut short. David had never experienced a love like that which Jonathan had shown him. Jonathan, the heir to the throne, had not clung to his rights, but had voluntarily renounced them in favour of David, whom he had protected and encouraged through the years. Jonathan's renunciation had not been an impulsive act. part of an ongoing outpouring of love to David. Jonathan had allowed his own interests to be disregarded in order that David could prosper. But after all that self-sacrifice, all that love poured out to David, who was now exiled from Israel, Jonathan was now suddenly gone. And David tears his clothes and weeps and loses his appetite and deeply, deeply mourns. And the loss never leaves him. In our remembrance this year, we come broken by the loss of people we know, members of our trans family who are no longer here. We, like David, mourn. Remember the beauty of those lost and reflect on the violence that has led to this point.